So the addiction recovery mythology is a religion. It's completely belief-based. It's not real.
100%.
Powerlessness and the idea that you're insane and out of control, and these whole ideas are just repeated, so it becomes a religion. All of addiction is just confusion of understanding the real personal autonomous reasons why we like something so much, and that we're willing to pay such a high price for something we like so much. And once you understand that and you start to dig in, it gets pretty easy to fix. I can get somebody from total hopelessness to not in 3 sessions. There's no other method in the world that does that. No pills, no meetings, no after recovery, no need for endless support. The treatment industry is always going to exist because the treatment industry is the religion of the times. And when you understand that you are autonomous, you have free will, you have a positive drive, you really can't ever lose. If there's something in our book that's wrong, I'll change it. I haven't found it yet. Now, with the porn issue, the PMO issue, there's a lot of this misinformation that is spreading from the substance use arena over about being biohacked by porn,
right?
You know, that your serotonin and dopamine is affected and that your brain is in control and the porn is in control. And the porn industry loves that, by the way. They bank on that because they get longer users. So it's a gamed system, and I show them the advertising and the gaming that goes on. And I also do that with substances with the cartels, big pharma, beer companies, booze companies, how the whole societal advertising works to build benefits and build the straw man of addiction, diabolical powers, and all of that can be a part of it too. Once you realize that the power lies within your own mind and that you're the miracle, it is totally transformative. It is massively empowering, and you never have the fears that you once had.
I read your book a couple months ago, The Freedom Model for Addictions. Mm-hmm. I think I've recommended it to literally all of my close friends multiple times. And, this is something that I've always been really interested in. I've always been very interested in psychology, and especially in the sense of when it comes to addictions and behaviors, and in a way, there's a lot of things that we do that we wish we didn't do. And that's why I've always been really interested in these kind of topics. And I've read so many books on these kind of things. But the thing is that I always felt that even though they had a lot of useful stuff, there was always something missing, right? There was something that was not, it's like, it's fine, but it's quite not working, right? And then I read your book. And as I started to read it, I was like, okay, this is it, and you get to a point that it finally clicks. And I'm like, this is it. This is the final piece, the missing piece of the puzzle, right? And one thing that I wish, because the problem with this is that it's a very complicated subject to explain, right? Like the book, in a way, it's kind of long. And also, not just that it takes a lot of time, but people are not very receptive to it. I think because, in a way, addiction can be a part of your personality and your identity. And if all of a sudden you come up and you're like, well, addictions, in a way, they don't really exist, people can be a little bit reactive towards that.
Oh, yeah, sure. Resistant to new information.
Exactly. Yep. Both because of the personality aspect and identity to it, and also because of, in a way, all the brainwashing and propaganda and repetition of what it actually is. So one of the first questions that I wanted to ask you, because I actually want help with this, because I wish I could tell more people about it, but the problem that I find myself into is that it takes a lot of time to explain it. So how would you do it? For example, you meet someone from Alcoholics Anonymous and you're like, how would I explain to this guy within 5 minutes that he's been lied to? And I think this is a great question to anyone that's just tuning into the video right now, to get like basically the one-on-one of your book in a way.
Yeah. So can I start?
Yeah.
All right. Sure. So I think that you're talking about a super challenge for anybody, because you have to figure out, first of all, in any conversation, where is that person at? In this whole, like, what is the depth of mythology that person is a believer in? So the addiction recovery mythology is a religion. So what you just described, the reason it's so complex is because it's completely belief-based. It's not real,
100%.
Objectively real. Powerlessness and the idea that you're insane and out of control, and these whole ideas are just repeated, so it becomes a religion. So the first thing I say to somebody is, I have to figure out, where are they? And I say, would you believe that there's a way to get over your problem in a very simple way without meetings, rehabs, or recovery of any
Are
kind?
you open to that?
Are you open to that? And that will immediately tell you, it'll trigger them to say, well, I don't know about that, you know, because I believe, and then you got it.
Right.
So then I'm not saying they have to believe in what I believe. I'm meeting them where they are, and I say, okay, I now understand where your beliefs are. What if I told you this point of fact, right? That you're not actually out of control. Yes, I am. I would never do these things if I wasn't okay. That's a myth, but let me help you with that. And once I help them with one, and I can do that usually within 5 minutes, they go, holy shit.
They get curious.
And they'll say, how many times will they say, I've thought that.
Yes.
But I was told I was crazy for thinking that.
Yes.
You know? And then the truth bomb, just immediately their mind opens to the truth, because the truth is so simple
and logical.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
So that's the process.
Right. It makes sense, because that's kind of how it happened to me, right? I started reading the book. I think I heard someone on YouTube talk about it, and I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And I start reading it, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's actually something to it. So you're completely right that's how it works. And you know, the thing with what you just said, that deep down they actually knew that it's kind of a lie what they believe. That's kind of what I've always felt when I've read all of these things. Because, for example, one of the biggest books I think out there when it comes to addiction, well, you probably know better than me, but as far as I know, that one from Alan Carr, when it comes to smoking addiction, the easy way to quit smoking or something like that.
Smoking.
Yeah. And I remember I was reading it, not because I'm a smoker, but just out of pure curiosity, because I think, like, in a way he describes that you can just replace smoking with whatever it is that you're struggling. And the thing that I kept thinking about is that there were times where he was like, no, but don't you see that it's not pleasurable, that you actually don't like it? But I'm like, no, I think actually people like it, right? And I think one of the things that I really liked about your book is how you go into this whole desire thing and the priorities, and not like whether it makes you happy or not, if it makes you happier, right? That's the key.
Right.
Yes. That's
exactly.
a key.
Exactly. Exactly.
I always tell people that the crowning achievement of all my research that we've done together is really understanding that happiness drives people.
100%.
And that is the sole motivation of humanity. And that when you understand that
fully,
all your judgment, your self-judgment, the judgment of others goes out the window, and all of a sudden things become very clear. It's like a veil gets lifted and you go, oh my God, I'm choosing this.
Yeah.
And then you kind of slyly smile and you go, yeah. Like it. You know? And then once you have the truth and you can say that to yourself without judgment, and knowing that as your coach, I'm not judging you either, then you can look at it like this whole demystified confusion comes off of the problem, and you look at it and you go, it's really not a problem. It's something I like for these reasons.
Yeah.
Then we can say, are the reasons valid?
Right.
That right now we're going to pick apart the validity of what your perception about this object of your desire is.
Yeah.
And that's where the rubber meets the road.
100%.
And people change. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, because something that I've heard a lot of times is that actually when you want to solve something in life, it's not about finding the answer, but actually understanding the problem. So if they have all these beliefs about what addiction is, they're actually not able to understand the problem. So that's why they cannot fix it.
That's exactly right. It's a veil. And then you couple that with the veils of guilt and shame that are heaped on, that we learn throughout all of Western society. We learn how to be guilty people. And we were taught that when we were little children. You know, you can't have that cookie because
you shouldn't like that.
You shouldn't like that cookie. It's bad for you. And you're 2 and you're like, fuck that. I like the cookie, dude.
Yeah.
So now you're automatically saying, oh yeah, mom, I don't like the cookie. I feel bad, but I really secretly like it, you know? And she leaves the room and you steal a cookie and then feel guilty about it. And it becomes this whole thing when the reality is mom should have said, you know what? I like cookies too, but we're going to meter it out a bit.
Yeah. You know? We're going to.
I really also like
guilt and shame are a problem.
I also really like what you said before, that the truth is actually really simple. And this is something that I've been thinking a lot about the past few months, that I feel like problems are not difficult to solve once you actually see them for what they are. Like if you're
That's
struggling with
right.
something, it's because you're missing like some part of it. You're actually not seeing the whole thing. And once you actually see it, like change is quick, is immediate, is easy.
That's right. So it's confusion. You know, all of addiction is just confusion of understanding the real personal autonomous reasons why we like something so much, and that we're willing to pay such a high price for something we like so much. And once you understand that and you start to dig in, it gets pretty easy to fix. Truth is easy to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Myths, not so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved, by the way, can I just jump in? I loved what you had to say about procrastination, type 1 and type 2.
Yeah, the early morning routines of entrepreneurs.
Dude,
We
I
watched that video.
You check some videos?
We
yeah,
did.
I loved how straightforward it was. How
Yeah.
because I get into this whole alpha male movement. I'm a pretty alpha dude, right? But I look at that shit and I'm like, I get so many guys that are like, I got to go to the gym. I go, do you even like the gym?
Yeah.
Like, obviously you don't like it if it's such a struggle to go,
Yeah.
dude.
like do something you like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny.
No, and this thing with health, like I always tell people, like there's so many ways to get healthy. I mean, you could just go walking, you can play basketball, you could do rock climbing. Like, why do the gym? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't like
Yeah.
it. But anyways, you know, one thing that I was wondering with your message, have you actually faced like institutional backlash or like some attempt of censorship?
Oh God, we're blacklisted everywhere.
Yeah.
We struggle horribly financially because of that.
Right.
And have for 36 years. Yeah, we were embroiled in lawsuits. I've had the state of New York and Alcoholics Anonymous Incorporated come send cops into my homes without warrants and threaten me. I've had my house vandalized. I've had my name put in print and sent to 14,000 groups saying I was responsible for missing children. My whole life was destroyed for 8 years. I mean, you can't imagine the shit I went through. They sent the police to constantly harass me for years and years. It got to a point where the court I'd get tickets every day for things I wasn't doing. And the judge in town would be like, Jesus Christ, you just take the ticket, rip it up and be like, go, Mark. You know, I went through, and Michelle did too. We all did.
And my dad did more than I did. I kind of stayed outside of it for a period of time.
It's horrible.
But understanding that we live and built this program in the place where AA was made, you know, like we're kind of in the epicenter of it.
Yeah.
And we're only about 30 miles from the capital, New York State, which, you know, is where the governing body of the treatment system for New York State is there. And so we figured if we couldn't make it here, like if we can make it here for real, with all of that rate, and we kind of had inroads there, which helped us, you know, get
moles basically
that let us know what was going on, and that, oh, they're coming after you for this, or they're coming after you for this.
It was wicked, painful, and stressful, and hard to go through.
That's crazy.
I had no idea how bad it was going to be, but
they leave us alone now.
Yeah, we won.
Oh. We published the book in 2017, and pretty much since then,
nothing.
They do not want to touch us with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, they don't want us publicizing what we do. They don't want to debate me. They've never. I even said it back, even when things were really caustic. That we're going back 25 years when all that was happening. I said, put an intern in here for a year. We're an open book, man. You don't have to subpoena me. We don't have to go to court. I don't even know what the hell we're going to court for. It's completely fucking insane, you know. But they were just bent on this message that addiction isn't real the way we see it as a compelled behavior, because then, if that's true, then treatment is unnecessary.
Yeah, which is very
and their
scary.
$1 billion budget is unnecessary.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's the exact same thing with the medical system.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I think is really true is that classic quote of like, see who you're not allowed to criticize and you will see who rules over you, right? That's kind of like
that's right.
dynamic.
It really is.
Yeah. But now we're at a place where it's been decades really since once we won the lawsuit against the state of New York, we were the first ones that were subpoenaed by Oasis that won ever. And they were like, wow, these guys are for real. And because we weren't doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
And, when you have the truth on your side and you're not doing anything wrong and you really just care about the truth and you're
people.
willing to live through that. You have to be willing to go through that.
Yeah. I mean, and at the time we started, because we were an educational program, right? So at the time we started, there was no regulations on education. There is now,
but
here in New York, but we're grandfathered in.
Yeah.
It's the truth kind of prevailed here.
Yeah, it did. It was hard, but we've had a nice truce. But when it comes to Google and all the big tech giants, they blacklist us. So they suppress us. We have more videos and more content than any program. I was the very first addiction help website on the World Wide Web in history.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 1999, I think.
Yeah, earlier. It was, I think, 97. But it was right when the internet became a thing, and nobody even thought about this thing. And I built this real cheesy website with, I think,
it was beautiful.
Yeah, it was great. It was yellow and blue, and it was just words, and it was block letters. It looked like code for thing. And but you know what? It got the message out to the world, and it
started the non-12-step movement.
Yeah. The alternative to treatment movement. It was crazy. It was, so we should be the biggest presence on page one. Our website literally goes from the beginning of pre-Google all the way to now. And yet we're, buried.
That's also something that sometimes nowadays I take like, that is a sign that this is the truth. Because, for example, like no one goes after flat earthers, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody cares.
But then they're going after you. So it's like, there has to be something here, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Something that I wanted to ask you is, do you think that social media has made it more difficult for people to deal with addictions, since now there's a lot of like communities that build around it, social reinforcement, like they repeat this message, like...
Yeah, I definitely think that there is, I don't know if it's social media, maybe the idea of information dissemination, but I think it's...
And confirmation bias too, a lot of people repeating we are addicts and we have these, and self-diagnosis, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's Big Pharma has a massive budget to be able to sell the idea, like addiction medicine is oxymoronic. It's hilarious to me because if there is addiction medicine, it's detox, right? If you physically have a problem, detox is fine and medically necessary. But when it comes to the mind, solving problems through pharmacology and trying to solve emotional issues, which are of the mind, our beliefs, how is a pill going to change your beliefs? It doesn't. No, heroin doesn't, right? Heroin doesn't, alcohol doesn't, neither does an antidepressant, neither does. But so I think that there's this massive religion around pills, like Suboxone, addiction medicine. So it's really moved from this sort of pseudo spiritual fake religiosity in AA with meetings and a very cult like to now the cult of pharmacology. And that is killing people.
Yeah.
That's bringing people down a road that it just becomes one more pill, and then that pill's not working, then this pill, and it breeds this hopelessness that's really hard to unwind when people become enmeshed in that. That's the tough one now.
And where do you think we're headed? Like, do you think this is actually going to change, or do you think it's going to keep getting worse?
Oh, here's what I think. I think that we are just launching our coaching certification program, right? Where we have things so well thought out and so vetted and so tested. Every one of our products is so we're great at what we do, So So now we can distribute that to the world. So I think that what's going to happen is there's going to be over the next 20 years that I'm alive, that I'm working at this with Michelle and our team. We're going to bring this to the world so other coaches can talk about this with people. And AA changed the world in a bad way.
Yes.
With a book and silly meetings and fear. So we're taking their playbook and using it against them with truth, no fear. So it's about distributing the book. It's about distributing the method through coaching. And I can get somebody from total hopelessness. Now, it's really not me. It's my coaching method coupled with the information. I can get them from total hopelessness to not in 3 sessions. And there's no other method in the world that does that. No pills, no meetings, no after recovery, no need for endless support. You've read the book, so you know there's no apparatus necessary that's external to you. So the question is building the puzzle with somebody and then understanding exactly what they're going through, not judging it, teaching them not to judge themselves, clearing away the mystifying guilt and shame so that they can look at the problem accurately, challenging that system, and then going forward. Because that's so efficient and because coaching works and we've vetted that, we've tested it ourselves, through years and years and years of being on Zoom and doing this all around the world, it's going to be very easy to quietly move and create a movement. And then the treatment industry is always going to exist because the treatment industry is the religion of the times. I'll give you an example. In the Middle Ages, the treatment system was the sale of indulgences, right? And that was the Catholic Church was the government. And they said, if you're guilty and sinful, you can give the church money and you will be absolved of your sins. And so it's called guilt payments. They used guilt and fear of hell to make people pay. And these are peasants, dude. They have nothing, and yet they're giving their money to the government, right? So this tactic of overreach and totalitarianism, the tyranny of experts, is going to exist no matter what.
Always.
The question is, how many lives underneath all of that carnage can we save with a movement that is voluntary, that is efficient, that is truthful, and is affordable? And we've created that entire system. So now it's just how many coaches can we get that understand this? We train them and move forward.
I mean, and the goal is not, see, there's the treatment system will always exist because there will always be people that want that. They want to be part of that system forever. But there are more people, thankfully, who want to just learn how to solve their own problems and move on. And so that's where the freedom model comes in. It's like, you can be not only solve this problem, but this method will help you solve future problems and avoid future problems because it's all about learning how to make decisions, right? Learning how to really figure out what you want and get it.
And to critique the status quo against facts and do your research and understand that what somebody might be feeding you may be a lie.
Yep.
Not to be paranoid, but to be critically thinking is imperative. And that you have a thinking apparatus called consciousness that isn't your brain, that is outside the brain, that this thing we think with, that nobody can touch or feel, and that everybody's equipped with that. And when you understand that you are autonomous, you have free will, you have a positive drive, you really can't ever lose.
100%.
At that point, when you realize that you are a miracle that way, and it's not hocus pocus, it's self-evident, And so yeah, I think that in the fullness of time, all things get done. Will it be in my lifetime? I don't know, but my job is just to make the movement happen.
That's amazing. Massive respect. Yeah. One thing that you mentioned that I think it's so interesting, the part about judgment, self-judgment, and the role that it plays. Could you explain a little bit more on that? Like, why is it so important?
It's wicked crucial. That's an Eastern thing, wicked. So I call it ghosts. You grow up with ideas and ways of thinking that are taught to you from the previous generation. And when you're a child, I kind of alluded to this earlier in the conversation, when you're a child, you're controlled for a good reason because you don't know enough about the world that, you know, you will walk out into a moving parking lot, you know, and your parents will come over and swat your ass and then say, you know, don't do that or the boogeyman will get you, or
You'll get run over.
Yeah. Or what the hell is wrong with you? Right. And you're a terrible kid. And now as parents, we do these things when kids are little, not because we're mean, but because we're trying to save their life and we're doing the best we can. And we learn to parent a certain way
from our parents,
right?
Parents, so
right.
It keeps going.
So there's this sort of guilt tactic that's very common in Western culture. It's less common, by the way, in third world. They do it differently. They use straw men and fear and different things. But anyway, so we have this sort of, as you grow, your parents have and I'm talking in generalities, but it is true. They have this idea that guilt works. If I guilt my kid into behaving for themselves, you know, then that works. But here's what happens. As parents, we don't outgrow that as our kids turn to adolescence. By the time your kid's like 4 or 5, they've already figured out that they're autonomous. They're like, go fuck yourself quietly in their mind, right? But they start feeling, but they're guilty. This guilt tactic and guilt and fear, and sometimes the boogeyman will get you. Now you're building straw men in your imagination. And these are all models of control to manipulate behavior. Well, if you continue to do that, we get parents that are doing that with a 40-year-old and they're in their 70s, you know, and that person is still living at home. And so we have this relationship of guilt that is a problem-solving technique that's really not good.
Well, it's not effective.
It's not effective at all. And it clouds things. So when you have a problem that is personal to you, like drinking and drugging, PMOing, whatever it might be, and it's destroying your life, and you feel guilty about it because your status quo, your sort of baseline is, I'm a shitty person, right? Obviously something's wrong with me. I shouldn't want to do this, the shoulds, right? And that you got as a kid. You shouldn't want the cookie. You shouldn't have gone out in the parking lot. You shouldn't have hurt that person, right? And so your baseline is, I'm such a f***ed up guy, you know? And so I call those the ghosts. Now you have the ghost talking to you. Every time you get high, you're like, I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be doing this. Now, the reality is that you like it, but that's completely obscured by your self-judgment that you learn to take on. So you're so focused on, I shouldn't, instead of, I really want. Right? The really want would have a smile. And that's over here. I really do like going to get the hooker, shooting heroin, and going to the hotel for 4 days. I really do like that. But I can't say that because I've learned that I shouldn't want that. And so you focus on the shouldn't till you're f***ing dead because you're never looking at, I like this. Why do I like it? Is it valid? And is it good? And is it good for me? And without judgment, without self-judgment, what really is going on? What do I like about that? And so when you get rid of the judgments of yourself, the shoulds, I shouldn't like this, you move that aside and you put it on a shelf and you go, I do like it. Why? What is it about? And is it objectively good for me? And sometimes having a habit of drinking and things like that, there's nothing fucking wrong with it. Some people determine I really do like heavy use, you know, and you know what? You're entitled to be happy, dude.
But you know what? Most people don't.
That's right.
Well, because what happens, what's so awful about the self-judgment is when you get to that point that it's become such a habit, it's your go-to habit. Every time you have a hard day, I had a hard day, and then you reach for the drink. Immediately when you reach for the drink, you feel two things simultaneously. One is the guilt and the shame, right? You feel the guilt and the shame. And then the other is, I'm going to get some relief, right? So now you're confused. And then you go and you have the drink, and for a brief second, you might feel a little bit of relief, but the guilt and the shame are there. They're there. And so you're not getting what you want from it. It hasn't changed your mind. You feel like a bigger piece of crap. So you dive deeper because now I've got to get obliterated. Now I've got to dive so deep to escape, right? That that then it becomes this cycle. And so the next day you feel worse. And what do you do when you feel bad? You go back to your thing that you think is going to make you feel better, which makes you feel worse. And so it's this horrible cycle. So when we say set it aside for a little while to do this, we want you to, like, and this is the thing that's so, but the treatment industry hears us say this, and I know they're like, set it aside and embrace your habit.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace it for all the wonderfulness you think it is.
That's right.
And so that you can really look at it. And, you've taken the veil off of Santa Claus. If you sit and you wait for Santa Claus on Christmas Eve at 35 years old and you embrace it and you're sitting there and you're waiting and you're so excited, you're going to realize that Santa isn't real. And that's what happens with the substance, with PMO, with all of these things, is if I go and I sit there and I'm like, it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to embrace this, and now let me do it mindfully and see what it is I really still like about it.
So the way that another angle of that, what she's describing, is when I talk to somebody, I say, obviously carefully, don't get a bunch of fentanyl and die.
Right.
But you know how to get high, obviously.
Yes,
you wouldn't be
you've been
talking
doing
to
it
me.
a long time.
So do your thing, but I want you to embrace it. But I need you to set all your guilt and self-judgment aside. And now at that point, we've talked about that, like we just did with you, in a much deeper, sometimes it's the entire first session to just extract the veil off and the blanket.
The shame and guilt. And,
that's obscuring truth. So now you have truth sitting here. I like this. Now, what I want you to do is they'll say, well, I do it because I get relief, like Michelle said. And I say, okay, now we need to separate that out. That's the next stage. Separate out that you're doing it for relief. And if you have a bad life that you need relief from, we're going to deal with the bad life as a separate issue. We need to disconnect the learned connections because they're not inherently connected. There's no reason why acetaldehyde poisoning and your bad life have any connection whatsoever. You've learned that.
You learned
so
that.
We're going to pull the
learn.
So the second session might be pulling that learned connection off. And then the homework is now you have exposed this raw preference that you've built that is really high and valuable, the gold. What I want you to do for homework is to indulge in it carefully, safely in a room, analyze it, and indulge in it on its own merits. You're not connecting it to your emotional trauma. You're not doing this because of guilt. All that shit we'll deal with later. That's a different emotional issue. This thing, you like the effect. And when you do it without all this stuff that you've connected, this power source, this, adding value, it's all gone. Is it really that exciting?
Yeah.
On its own merits.
Yep.
And then they go, fuck, that's pretty lame. I feel sick. I feel nauseous. My ears are boiling hot. My eyeballs feel pressure. I don't feel dizzy, or I feel dizzy. I don't feel very good. On its own merits, this fucking sucks.
100%.
And so that kind of shakes. Then they say, all right. And when we get through that process, now let's deal with your issues as separate entities. Why are you depressed? What about this trauma? What about all this stuff? That's life, dude. That's just life. We all have shitty lives at some point, but we're going to deal with that. So that's the process of coaching.
Yeah.
100%.
Long answers to short questions.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. And it reminded me, like, many years ago when I was way younger, I used to have like a video game addiction problem. That's why I was also looking into all of these things many years ago. I think like I've been looking into this kind of stuff for 10 years now. And I remember, like, without knowing the things from your book and all of that, like, accidentally this is what happened, because what happened always with me with video games is that I played them, but deep down I was like, I don't want to do this, but I keep doing it, right? And I kept coming back and forth. But when I went back to video games, I was like playing I don't know how many hours a day, completely addicted, absorbed. And there was one time that I did it, but as we were talking about, like, no judgment, no nothing, and I was just like fully present in it. And then I was just looking at myself like, what is happening right now? What am I actually doing? Right? There's this thing and I am clicking and this. It's like, what is this? Right? And slowly it just started to break. And I just, as you were saying, I was just looking at this thing. I'm like, this is not exciting. This is actually pretty lame. Yeah. And then I think like I just deleted everything, uninstalled everything, and I haven't touched video games in I don't know how many years. So
Yeah.
that's exactly how it happened. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the freedom model.
Yeah.
It's exposing objective truth, analyzing objective truth, and clearing the deck so you can.
And you don't have to judge your past behaviors because you don't nobody is doing the same things and likes the same things that they liked at 10 years old when they're in their 30s. Typically, it's okay to have something that was your go-to thing at one point and then grow out of it. And that's the natural way.
Yeah. Also, like one thing that a lot of people talk about when it comes to these things is like the role of identity. And I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the way you change identity is by first embracing the identity that you currently have, right? Which is what we're talking about, like going through who you are right now. And naturally, through just seeing the truth and what you are and what you're doing and all of that, that identity inevitably changes to something like better, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I had just crashed the car. I was 18 years old. I had gone to jail, and my whole life had cascaded in on me. And my father said, "You're no longer a part of this family. You have to go." And I was like, "Oh, where am I going to go? I have no place. It's January in upstate New York. It's cold as hell, and I got no money." He's like, "I don't really give. You're out of here."
He was the youngest of 12. His father was done.
Yeah, my father was totally cooked. 8 of us went to rehab. I mean, it was a total.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big family.
Yep. German immigrant parents, farmers.
Yeah. Wow. And so there I was on the streets of Troy, New York, and on a corner, and I realized I didn't know what to do. I was homeless, and I could have went to my mother's house. I could have went to my brother's house, but I was so embarrassed by my situation that for 2 days I lived on buses and sort of just kind of was very hungry and just miserable. And then I had an epiphany, and it was really golden. And that was, I was sitting on the corner, and I was like, if every single thing that I've been thinking my whole life, I was so lonely at the time too. I had no friends, and it has gotten me to this corner. If I did the opposite, I came up with this logical argument. If I did the opposite of what I think, what would that be? And I said, that would be a good citizen. I was like, I need to be the good citizen. And then I said, what would a good citizen do? So it wasn't me anymore. It was this icon that I just literally created in my head. And I said, he would get a haircut. He would look the part of a successful citizen, because I had long hair. It was the 80s and stuff. And so I went in with my last $14. I got a haircut, and then I had, I think, like $4 left over, whatever it was. And I said, what would the good citizen do next? He would go get a job. And I threw out my thumb, because in the 80s, you hitchhiked everywhere if you didn't have a car. And I worked at a food warehouse where I could eat. And I got the job that day, that hour. I went and got the job, and I ate. I stole food in the warehouse as I worked. And I figured out how to survive being the good citizen. But to your point, how I saw myself, and I do this with coaching students all the time if they have a self-image issue. So you got to come up with some icon in your mind of who are you going to be? I was no longer the addict. I was no longer even a Sheeran. They said, you can't even be in this family anymore. I was kicked out of my family. I was excommunicated. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because I became the good citizen. And within 6 months, my life took off, and yeah, it was a wild ride, but yeah, self-image matters
hugely.
And do you think, because also in the world of addiction, I hear a lot of people talk about rock bottom and the importance of hitting rock bottom. Do you think that is a thing? Like, what's your take on the whole rock bottom thing?
That's terrible. That's how you kill people.
Yeah, it's a bottom. All a bottom really is getting to a point where you think, I think I could do something different. And I mean, we've said it all the time. Treatment uses rock bottom because to explain away when they fail. And so that's where that came from. AA and treatment. It's like, oh, they haven't hit bottom yet.
They didn't want it enough.
Yeah. And and then if you stick around, I mean, he and I were both around AA for about 20 years, 10 years as children with our parents and 10 years as adults in AA. And the amount of people that we saw die was outrageous and
staggering.
tragic.
It's staggering.
And each time it's the same mantra. He just didn't want it bad enough.
Yeah,
He,
Bobby,
you know,
he didn't want it. He didn't want to go to the meetings and stuff. You know,
yeah,
he didn't want it bad enough. His rock bottom, I guess, had to
it
be
had
death.
to be death. It had to be death. You want your rock bottom to be death? And I can remember thinking, even before I went to AA, like, thinking, that seems weird.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense to me that you would tell people that they should go out and get worse.
Yeah, that the answer is to get
Mm.
dangerously worse. Isn't that, it's so antithetical to logic, and yet it's repeated endlessly because
by therapists.
yeah, you're going to have to hit rock bottom. You're going to have to hit rock bottom. So what is that? There is no, by the way, no objective standard for that. Is rock bottom where you are homeless?
Right.
With withdrawal in a street? Or is it you're going to detox? Or is it now when you start going to meet? What does that even? It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. So the person just continually says, "Fuck, I guess I
just didn't hit bottom.
I'm now a chronic relapser."
Yeah,
so they once you're through 3 treatment centers and have failed the system, you've failed the system. The system hasn't failed you. And now you're a chronic relapser. So now your insurance won't pay anymore. So now you're putting a state-run program on, and now you can't work anymore because now you're on Medicaid and they got you on Suboxone and that for life, or methadone, and you're going to a clinic every day and you can't work. And none of that was necessary.
No.
None of that was necessary. What was necessary was taking that person where they are then and saying, did you know that your life can get better?
Yep.
Why the fuck are we going in the other direction? You need to hit rock bottom. That is completely insane. Yeah. So I'm a little passionate about that because they told me that shit and it ended with a gun in my mouth after treatment.
Yeah.
It was bad.
I think this related to this, like if you were in charge and you had absolute control of the healthcare system, and especially when it comes to addictions and all of that stuff, what is it that you would do? Like, how would you restructure it?
Ooh.
Yeah,
that's a great question.
Yeah, I would do exactly what we're doing. And that is I would privatize the whole thing, get the government out of it. There's no reason to have a sanctioning body involved. I would teach coaches, independent coaches that have to work on their merits of their expertise. And I would have us, Baldwin Research Institute, train everybody. And that may seem self-serving, but the truth is we're the only ones that know the truth fully, are unequivocal, and will not bow to any mythology. If there's something in our book that's wrong, I'll change it. I haven't found it yet.
I know.
And nobody else
we've been
has.
looking.
Yeah.
Right. We've been looking and we've challenged other people to, show us something that, and people have sent us research. They sent us research, which is easy to debunk, honest to God, because the bulk of the research out there is funded by people with vested interests and making money. So I would start too with the lowest level of the educational system, and let's stop teaching little children.
Yeah, that's insane.
That their brains are in control of their bodies, and that if you are born with if you have addiction in your family, you're screwed. Like we would start right from the youngest all the way up and educate people.
Yeah. And ironically, the way we would educate them is we would eliminate a lot of the awareness campaigns, because the awareness campaigns are awareness of mythology.
Right.
So we would eliminate every single program that taught people that they're fragile.
Yeah.
This idea that people are these fragile, trauma-induced minions of circumstance is literally killing the youth. You saw overdose rates skyrocket, partially from fentanyl from China. I mean, they were trying to kill our young men is what it was. And we've kind of figured that out. You're seeing that regulate because it always does. But yeah, I would get the government and all the mythology. So we would start with the youth and go forward. Mm-hmm. We'd probably have a 2-pronged approach. Actually, it'd be the youth and the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, saving the people that are being spit out of the system.
Do you think it's equally important to? Because in a few months, I might have a psychologist for an interview, and one of the questions that I wanted to ask him, and now I'm going to ask you, is what do you think it's better? although choosing might be stupid, maybe they're equally both important. But I wanted to ask him, like, do you think it's better to help older people who are already suffering from certain psychological conditions, or to help people who still don't have them so that they don't get it, right? So with what you were saying, what do you think it's better? Ideally, we do both, 100%, right? But what might be better, to help young kids so that they don't even get there, or to help people who are already there?
Right. So what you're talking about is resource allocation. The answer is to do both. And I think we can do both. I think we can do both because we have the expertise in both areas. So the question is, but if we had to choose, it would be prevention first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adults have made the choices they've made that may sound Darwinian or whatever, but an adult has at least their own capability of living on their own and making decisions for themselves. A child is a victim of the system, right. If the system is bad. So I would definitely work on prevention with youth. That's the hardest one to break into, though, because tyranny loves children.
Yeah,
it does.
100%.
Yeah.
Very, very true. Very true. Could you share, without naming names, like some of the most extraordinary changes and stories from people that you've witnessed or heard?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so just to put it for the audience, just to put it in perspective, we've worked with over 27,000 people, right? Wow. So this is going back 36 years. So Michelle and I have done a lot of work with a lot of people. I think that I can't tell just one story. I can tell you a class of people because their stories are all generally alike. Mm-hmm. And that keeps the details so a person doesn't feel like I'm talking about them, because people listen to this stuff. I'll give you an example. There's probably 5 people that I've worked with that have been to over 30 to 40 treatment centers, have been in the system for decades, were completely institutionalized. And I just thought of another story that the person's gone now and they've moved on. So I'll tell that in a second. But those people, within a very short period of time, they get it, they change their life, they become very successful people. So that class is really important to me because that was me, right? I was in treatment since I was a little kid. I was in therapies. I was in the system of AA and the cult since I was a little boy. And to be sucked out of that and spit out into this freedom is an amazing thing. Let me tell a story about, we'll call her Linda. Okay. So Linda came to me in probably 1996. I was just 26 years old doing the research. But one of the things, I had figured out a lot of the freedom model without it being called the freedom model yet, right? I'd figured out the components. And she came to me and she was institutionalized in a mental hospital for about 12 years, had never seen outside. And they referred her to my retreat at the time. We had a residential retreat up here in upstate New York. She was so agoraphobic that she wouldn't come to the kitchen. She didn't know how to function as a human being. And I said, I'm going to do something radical with her that is a huge risk. Now, most people would not do this. I brought her up into the Adirondacks. I got her to get in the car and I brought her up into the Adirondacks and I said, it's just you and me. And I had Maddie with us and your father, and it starts pouring rain. It's probably 50 degrees. It's miserable, dude. I get her to get out of the car and start walking up Cathead Mountain. Now, some of you may know Cathead. And it's a rough mountain, man. There's rock faces and all this stuff. And now the water is pouring down over the rocks and we're soaked. And I noticed she's not crying. You know, at first she'd get really nervous and she's looking around and we're talking. And the whole time I said, Matt and Jer went ahead. And so it was just me and her. And she goes, how am I going to get up this mountain? And it was like 2 miles up and 2 miles down. Now this woman had not been out of a building in a decade or more. And I said, you're going to put your foot where, when I step, then when I leave that, you're going to put your foot there and your foot there. And I literally, it took us it was like a 12-hour thing. I fed her. We built a fire at one point and we walked step by step up that mountain to the top. And there was no view. There was no view because it was all cloudy, stormy, right? And the high winds, and she's all shivering and I, but I'm an outdoorsman and a woodsman, so I knew how to take care of her and dry her stuff out sometimes. Anyway, we get all the way back down, transform, because she was listening. and I was teaching her the whole time. And there are times where it was silent because there was only so much she could take. But something happened in that cadence where she learned to trust, because when you're in the mental health system, as I was, you don't trust anybody. Everybody's just, it seems like, not to get you, really. That's how it feels after a while. Yeah. So yeah, it changed her life, and she ended up never going back to the institution. She didn't drink and drug. And that was by far, that and another guy that was schizophrenic that I worked with, who was friends with me right up till today, for, nearly 30 years. So those two cases were the most hardcore, the most probably mentally ill. They had legitimate issues mentally that were turned around. So you have somebody who's institutionalized, had a massive drinking and drugging problem, was heavily medicated, and they completely turned around. But it was based on non-judgment. I did not judge them, and I loved them. I just loved them.
And told them the truth.
And told them the truth, as hard as it was. A lot of tears, man.
Yeah.
It was good.
I think that's a big challenge, because like what you were saying about not trusting all these like professionals, I think one big problem is that you can feel that they don't care, right? You're saying that you gave her love, but you can feel when you're with these professionals, or even when you go to the hospital, you're like, this doctor, he doesn't care about me. And I'm sure that makes it really, really difficult.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It is. I think it's, because my background is in psychology and behavioral health, and most of the people that I've gone to school with were very caring individuals. But especially when you work with people, substance users, and mental health, when you work in mental health, I think it's easy. And I read a lot of books about like clinical studies and clinical, like people in the clinical field, and they write about their patients and stuff. And it becomes very easy to become detached, and people feel that. Like when you're going to someone for help with something that's so personally debilitating and so personal to you, if you even feel remotely like that person doesn't care, there's not a good connection there, there's no help. You're not going to get helped by that.
That's a great point. You have radar for that.
You do.
You have radar because you already feel like such a burden to the world. And yeah.
But I think on the mental health professional side too, they get worn out. It for us, I mean, we've been doing this 36 years, and I know that I have, from as much as I love the people I coach, from time to time it does get
daunting.
It does. And here's the difference though. Here's the difference with our coaches. And what changed for me being a coach was not having a dog in the fight, was understanding that the only thing I want to help you to do is make your own decisions.
Yeah.
Like
you don't have to fix them.
What you choose to do is totally on you, and I will applaud you for it. Right. Whatever that is. And I think a lot of clinicians get burnt out because they do feel like they have a stake in the outcome, right? Like, and when I say outcome, the outcome of the behavior. Yeah. So if somebody comes to you and they want to quit drinking, my first question to somebody is, why did you sign up for coaching? Yeah. Oh, I got to quit drinking. You've got to quit drinking? That's different than saying you want to. Like let's work on that first.
Yeah.
Because if you don't want to quit drinking, you're not going to, regardless of how many sessions we have.
Right.
That's an amazing point. That's an amazing point. One thing that I'm really curious, I don't know if this is a proper question or not, but like, what are the demographics of people to come to you? Does it tend to be older people, younger people, more men than women, more women than men?
Well, it's always been about 60% men, 40% women, right around there. It'll bounce around. And the average age is 32. So it
depends on the problem too. Now, I mean, like we have a pretty avid coaching business with PMO now. And so that's 90% men.
For those that don't know, PMO is porn, masturbation, orgasm issues, right? Yes. Addictions, quote unquote. And so that wasn't something that we originally thought of as a problem. It's become the freedom model was found on Reddit, and then that whole community of people is struggling horribly, and we have a lot of young men,
lot of young
lot
men,
of young
under
men
30 years old.
that really are being fed a lot of misinformation. And so I wrote a book about it. And so now we coach that demographic a lot, probably as much as substance users.
Wow.
That's become a huge, and that's sort of now delving into the video gaming and gambling, and we deal with smoking. And so now the freedom model has spread into these different areas. So we have workshops for PMO issues, an entire textbook that we've written about that, an addendum to the freedom model, just specifically for the porn issue.
Is there anything
so that demographic is young.
Is there anything fundamentally different about it? Like, does the freedom model change something about it when it comes to PMO? Like the fact that you wrote a specific book for it?
Only the fundamentals are no different, but the application to the problem is it requires more coaching because of the embarrassment factor. So the hidden nature of the PMO thing, because people aren't publicly masturbating typically, right? So you can go to a bar and drink and it's socially accepted. So the stigmas are much deeper with the PMO issue. And so the non-judgment part, the open dialogue and coaching sometimes really throws the guy off, where I talk in very explicit language and say, you know, what genres of porn do you like? You got to be explicit. You got to tell me, because we have to figure out why you like that anatomical feature or that style of sex or that type of dominance or submission or whatever it might be. And when you have a conversation that is totally open and without judgment about things that most people will find abhorrent or very difficult to talk about, progress happens quick. It does. Because with one-on-one, you get rid of the judgment, and then they can really say, well, I do like this, and this. And I go, why? You know, and there's always very obvious reasons that they don't see. Also now with the porn issue, the PMO issue, there's a lot of this misinformation that is spreading from the substance use arena over about being biohacked by porn, right? You know, that your serotonin and dopamine is affected and that your brain is in control and the porn is in control. And the porn industry loves that, by the way. They bank on that because they get longer users and more ad time. So it's a gamed system, and I show them the advertising and the gaming that goes on. And I also do that with substances, with the cartels, big pharma, beer companies, booze companies, bars, how the whole societal advertising works to build benefits and build the straw man of addiction, diabolical powers, and all of that can be a part of it too. So it depends on the individual and what their beliefs are and where their problem is centered.
That's so interesting. And in fact, that's one of the questions. Yeah, that's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. Like, are you actually getting more people for substance abuse, like alcohol, these kind of stuff, or also digital addiction? So I guess now it's pretty even, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. Well, I think those are mostly all of the questions that I wanted to ask you. One last thing that I would like to ask you, like, what are, like, there's all these lessons that you can learn from addiction by going through it yourself, right? But what are the things that you guys have learned on top of it from helping so many people? Like, are there extra things that you learned after seeing so many cases and so many things?
Yeah. My whole life is completely different based on what I do for a living. First of all, you become enormously aware of how you're being gamed constantly by society and media. And I'm hyper aware, not in a bad way, of the bullshit that's being sold to me. And I think that it's really freeing. Like during COVID, I didn't wear a mask. I didn't give a shit. I didn't get vaccinated. I went to work every day and I got so much flack. And I literally was like, go f yourself. I'm going to live my life as if this isn't happening because I see the game. You know, and I saw the game immediately because once you see the matrix, and my God, substance use and PMOing is a matrix. One, I mean,
hardcore.
It is complete fantasy that is industrialized. based on beliefs, erroneous beliefs. And I want to back up. I just remembered something I want to say, and it's very important. And that is, I don't want to bag on the people that are dealing in the mental health industry that are floor workers and the staffs that care. So it may have sounded like I was bagging on them, as a whole. I'm not. I think it's a broken system that they're doing amazing work in, and it's a hard business. So I wanted to say that. I didn't want to forget that. But yeah, my life is totally different. I am hyper aware. I also have learned not to judge. And that has saved my marriage. It's made my relationship with my children very tight and close. My kids are fully aware of the bullshit in the world. And they're highly successful children, well-adjusted and they all learned how to drink with me, how to have healthy norms. They experimented with drugs without a hitch. And all of that happened in a very beautiful way because of what I know. So it's changed my whole world.
Yeah. Same between us with our respective families. We have 6 children. He has 3, I have 3. And both of us married people who were quote unquote addicts, right? And so in our little experiment of our anecdotal experience here, none of our 6 children have had any issues with addictions of any kind.
Because they see the Matrix.
Because they saw the Matrix, and they were educated from the beginning on the immense power of your mind.
Yeah, how to think for yourself critically. And so they're very independent children who now.
I mean, they're all adults.
Yeah.
My oldest is in his 30s, so
yeah, we have grandchildren.
We have grandchildren.
Okay. This Matrix thing is like a magic trick. It's like once you see it, you cannot unsee it.
That's right.
That's right. That's right. Once you realize that the power lies within your own mind and that you're the miracle, it is totally transformative. It is massively empowering, and you never have the fears that you once had. Yeah. It's gone.
And you don't have to be down on it either and take the stance that, oh, the world is terrible or anything like that. No, you don't have to buy in. You're free. And there are a lot of people that also are free.
Yeah.
And so you start to see those people, and they see you, and you make this community.
And the other thing, much unlike the Matrix movies, you can dabble with the Matrix. Like, we still tie one on
every once in a while. We like to have a couple cocktails
and believe in the mythology for a little while.
Go out and see live music and act a fool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, guys. Thank you very much. If there's like a final message that you want to say, and also talk about like where people can find you, social media, website, etc., etc.
Yeah. So what we really are pushing right now, if there was one thing I'd like said, is that we are looking for coaches who want to be certified in our model. We will teach you. It's a 10-week course, and that can be found at thefreedommodel.org/certification. That's number 1. If you need coaching, and also for the certification course and or coaching, there's financing available for all that, and our prices are all affordable. We made sure of that. Is there anything? I mean, our books, our workshops.
Everything can be found at thefreedommodel.org. We have a YouTube channel with more than 2,500 videos on it. Lots of information.
The podcast and our app.
Yeah, we have a podcast, The Addiction Solution.
Very popular.
And our free mobile app is on our website.
And that has a lot of sample content that you can look at, and you can sign up for anything through the app as well. And of course,
we have our book.
Our book, and they come in audio form as well. Michelle wrote a book for families, Freedom Model for the Family. That's important for families to understand what the hell this is. It's a lot shorter.
It's a lot shorter.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to put all the links in the description and the pinned comments so people can find everything. And that's it. Thank you so much. That was an amazing interview.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful.